At exactly 2:17 a.m., something knocks on my bedroom door. Every night. 3 taps, soft, precise, and patient. The kind of sound that doesn't ask permission, it waits for you to understand it. The first time, I thought it was the wind. The second, the old wood expanding. By the third night, it had a rhythm. By the fourth, it knew mine. I freeze every time, not because of the knock itself, but because the silence that follows feels aware. It swallows the house whole. I hold my breath and count the other sounds that prove my world is still normal. Isla's slow breathing from her room, the distant tick of the kitchen clock, the weak winter wind slipping down our street. Everything is still. Everything is familiar, except the knock. Before all this, we lived the kind of days people assume they'll get forever. Aisha cooked like she was learning a new dialect, careful, curious, tasting every spice with the precision of someone decoding meaning. Her hijab was always the boldest thing in a quiet room, the color I could still see when I blinked too long. Downtown, she worked in a small office, answering phones, organizing papers, softening the edges of everyone who spoke to her. Ela was 5, bright, small, a flash of Aisha's cheekbones with my stubbornness glued on top. And Daisy, our dog, followed that child like she was guarding a queen. And then, one night, Aisha didn't come home. The hospital held us under fluorescent lights and antiseptic air, pressing forms into my hands that felt heavier than paper should. People spoke carefully, reducing the world into a few sentences. Heart attack, sudden. The autopsy confirms it. Police cleared Mark. Mark, a coworker. A name that sat in my mind with the wrong texture, the wrong temperature. Grief makes you remember things you should have forgotten and doubt things you accepted too quickly. I tried to believe the official story. I tried to arrange it neatly in the same drawer where I kept real-life facts, bills, school notices, the white ring the coffee mug leaves on the counter. But when the house settled at night, when it was just us and the dark, another kind of fact began to slip in through the edges of sleep. Aisha's voice. The first time I heard it, I thought I was dreaming. I woke with my throat dry, the kind of waking where you can't tell if you have been breathing all night. The clock read 2:17 a.m. The knock came afterward, like clockwork. I sat up. The bedroom was a monochrome of moonlight on curtains and the silhouette of the wardrobe. 3 raps, soft but precise, and then a voice so familiar it burned. Hassan. Not Aisha's laugh, not a full sentence. Just my name said the way she always said it, gentle and carrying as if across a kitchen table. I told myself it was sleep, that the mind is a treacherous place in the thin hours. I told myself I was tired. I remember going into Isla's room that night and finding her awake and calm in a way that put me on edge. She looked up at me with the same sleepy certainty she used to give before bed. "Mommy said you could come," she told me, as if that settled everything. Her small hand found mine without reaching for it. Daisy nestled at her feet, body warm and steady. I wondered then whether a child's belief can anchor anything at all. If you want the full story and every detail, hit subscribe. If this kind of thing gets under your skin like it did mine, stick around. After that, the knocks became a part of our nights. Not every night at first. The pattern took time to trust itself. But 2:17 began threading through our lives like a seam you could trace. Sometimes the knock was followed by nothing but silence and the faint perfume of something Aisha used to wear, rose and lemon oil. So faint I thought I might be remembering smell rather than sensing it. Other nights, Ela would answer questions I hadn't yet learned to ask. She called the visitor Mommy in the way children do, certain of what adults are not. She described things only Aisha would know: the small bruise on the underside of a book that had fallen, the way Aisha used to clip the raisins out of trail mix and place them on a paper plate for Ela. At times, she'd giggle alone in her bed, and I would stand in the doorway, half paralyzed, hearing the edges of Aisha's laugh in my daughter's small breath. There were moments that made me want to lean into the comfort of that possibility. Maybe this was Aisha, keeping watch. The thought was a salve for an open wound. It is how grief teaches you to hope for reasons that make no logical sense. But other moments widened the suspicion that something else was at play. A shadow in the hallway that moved wrong. Cabinets left open in the kitchen where I was sure I had closed them. Daisy, usually relaxed, raising her hackles and refusing to go into certain rooms. Things that could be explained away if you wanted to explain them away, and things that left a bitter, stubborn question in my chest when explanation didn't fit. I grew up with stories that teach you to listen for patterns. Mine began with a memory that had nothing to do with Aisha, but everything to do with the way being watched feels familiar. When I was 10, there was a park behind our old apartment where a single oak tree stood like an island. There was a swing dangling from one of its thick branches. I remember that night because it was too windy to be a normal neighborhood breeze. The air had a salt tang because we were near the river. I was spinning too high, limbs loose and light with that reckless certainty kids have, when suddenly my foot slipped and I felt the rope cut against my palm. For a second, I was afraid I would go over the top and land wrong. Then something without a visible shape, took the swing and pulled it back with a force that split the seat at the seam. The plank snapped and wood splintered. My hands left the rope as if somebody else had yanked it for me. I landed in a tangle on the grass, stunned and whole. I looked around. No one was there. Just a tree, the broken swing, and the quiet rustle of leaves. That memory did two things for me. It taught me the vocabulary of being saved by an absence, and it taught me to distrust the solidness of the world, because sometimes things will happen and the only witness is the wind. Years later, when something watched from the dark at the back of our property, when a tall man stood behind the oak at the edge of the woods, just beyond the yard light, I felt the echo of that split plank in my gut. He never came forward. He did not speak. He watched. When I walked toward him, he disappeared into the trees like smoke. I saw his silhouette once more against the trunk for a heartbeat, and then nothing. I never filed a report. There was no crime that had been committed, only a presence that left the skin on my arms cold. The house is full of small betrayals. The light fittings, which are supposed to be obedient to a switch, sometimes would flash on by themselves. Cups in the cupboard would shift an inch, as if nudged. Once I woke to the sound of dishes in the sink and found the kitchen light on, all the cabinets ajar, though I had locked the back door and shut every panel before bed. Daisy refused to go near that room for weeks. Even now she circles at the threshold and gives me a look that asks if this place will always be unreliable. And yet the official facts remained. The autopsy, heart attack, police cleared Mark. I would hear those phrases repeated in my head like a defense mechanism people use to make unacceptable things acceptable. I did not have proof of anything beyond the hollow left where a person had been. Grief is lonely in that way. It can take your hand and lead you into dangerous quiet. I could feel the old part of me, the part that had felt the swing jerk beneath his hands, drawing parallels. Shadow meets pattern. The world offers a string of related beats, and my mind, hungry for meaning, tied them together. Ela's replies to the knocks changed as time passed. At first, she would merely whisper, "Mommy." She'd press the backs of her hands to her ears and smile like she was listening to a story. Then she started repeating phrases she shouldn't have known, half-sentences that Aisha would use when she was thinking, "Not tonight, not now," or the nicknames she gave me when we were being tender in a room that had curtains closed against the winter. Once she told me, "Mommy says you have to sleep, Daddy. Mommy says you're tired." The reassurance cut me in two because I knew Aisha would have known how to say it. She knew how to make a man put down his hands on the wheel and breathe. The knocks were not loud. They were exact, 3 taps, then a pause, then sometimes a softer single tap. I began to count them as one counts a stranger's footsteps on a long hallway, trying to measure intention from rhythm. You try rational things in these moments. You check the locks, you go to the window, you stand with your back to the door and watch the shadow of the knob. One night, foolish with a sleep-deprived courage, I opened the door a fraction. The hallway was empty. A cool draft ran past my ankles and carried the smell of laundry detergent and rose. I crouched down and listened. On the floor, in the slice of moon, there were 2 shadows where there had only been space. One was the outline of me bending. The other was, if I let myself name it, Aisha's profile, hair tied back the way she wore it at the office, the curve of her nose the way only I knew it. I shut the door and didn't breathe for a long time. Perhaps the cruelest thing about grief is its ability to turn ordinary longings into evidence. I wanted it to be her so badly that I would dream up reasons to believe. But other nights stripped that comforting possibility away. Once, Ela told me something in a voice too adult for her years. "Mommy says there are others," she said, with the terrible simplicity of a child stating a fact. "Mommy says she is not alone." The words didn't fit with the woman I had loved, the woman who made lists in colored pens and hummed old songs to us like spells. They fit better with stories about things that use love as bait. I started taking precautions I had never thought I would need. I moved Ela's bed into my room for a while. I locked doors twice and checked windows 3 times. I sat with Daisy in the living room until the light hurt my eyes. I watched the street for movement, for headlights, for any shadow that was not mine. I called people who said the right words. I tried to sleep like a person who no longer trusted night. But the knock at 2:17 slid across these defenses with a patience that felt like malice. It arrived when I had convinced myself the night was safe and steady. When the rhythm accelerated, I noticed physical changes in myself. I clenched my jaw in the day without realizing it. My hands trembled over the steering wheel. There were mornings I would wake with the taste of metal at the back of my throat, a tension so old that it had roots in the years of being small and watched. Memories of that swing tugged at the edges of my life then, years and years of being touched by things that had no bodies. I became certain that the same force had followed me here in different shapes. It could be Aisha. It could be something else learning her cadence. I could not know. It happened one night when everything aligned in a way that made me feel like the universe had finally stopped avoiding answering me. We had been living in the house for months after the funeral, trying on routines like clothes that no longer fit. I had one of those nights where I kept waking, the kind where sleep leaks through your eyelids in thin, unsatisfying ribbons. At 2:17 a.m., the knock came, the 3 soft taps that had become an instrument in my life. This time, Ela was not in the bedroom. Her door was closed. The house smelled like lavender and the faintness of old picture frames. I heard the tiny scuff of a slipper on wood, an intentional sound, like someone making of themselves a presence in the world. I went down the hall. The moon cast a bright, patient square on the kitchen floor, where the clock ticked in a room that never used to be so loud. The knock at the front door sounded again, but this time there was another sound behind me. It was a whisper of fabric and air, the sound of someone very close, leaving a temperature in the room where skin had not been. I turned and saw the doorway to the living room, and across the floor were 2 shadows, elongated and thin in the night. One matched my outline, the other matched Aisha's, in a posture I could have traced with my eyes closed. Ela was standing in the doorway, barefoot and small, her hair in a tangle. She held out her hand as if waiting for a train to arrive. "Mommy says Dad is waiting for you," she announced with an unsettling calm. Her voice was clear as a bell. I remembered the sudden surge of protectiveness that slammed into me then, so fierce I think it sounded like a sound half formed in my throat. I should have scooped her up then and run. All my instincts screamed to pick her up, to put distance between the two of us and whatever it was on the other side of the floor. Instead, The world paused in a way that felt like the drawing back of water before a storm. The shadow nearest the door moved very slightly, as if replying to the child's invitation. It came in silhouette only, a shape shaped into the idea of a person by moonlight. For the barest second, I thought I saw a tilt of a head, the way Aisha would tilt it when listening to something inside her head. Then, in the second after, ambivalence exploded into motion. I ran. I remember scooping Ela with one arm and grabbing her ankle with the other in a graceless scramble. Her knees hit my hips, her breath lodged against my neck. "No," I said to whatever occupied that floor, the single syllable a mistake because it was not an argument. The two shadows shrank, and unreality wound into the familiar. The room was suddenly too small for what I wanted to protect. The shadow by the doorway congealed into nothing, evaporating like steam. The knock at 217 came again, urgent now, like a clock realizing it had been ignored. And then, the silence was a physical thing pressing against my ears. We left the house that night. I drove aimlessly, with Ela asleep on my shoulder and Daisy's head in my lap, and by the time the sun started to trace the edges of the buildings, I sold the keys. I signed papers with a shaking pen and told myself that leaving would be the answer. We packed what a single father and a 5-year-old can pack into 2 suitcases and a leash. We walked away, thinking the rhythm behind us would unspool. It did not. The knock did not stop because we changed houses. The knock lived in memory like a song you can't quite forget. Sometimes in the middle of a new night, as the clock on a wall elsewhere traveled toward 217, my shoulders would tense as if a hand were at the back of my neck. I found myself turning toward doors in other places. And sometimes Isla would hum a little tune and go quiet in a way that told me she had heard someone speaking your name in the sleep dark. She still talks about Mommy's friend, but now she says it like a fact she learned in school. She mentions other names sometimes when she is playing that are not ours. I do not know what to make of it. People asked, sometimes in the most well-meaning of ways, what I expected would happen. They wanted closure in a simple shape, proof, evidence, a dramatic reveal. I kept repeating the official lines, as if practice made them true for me. The autopsy, heart attack, police cleared mark. I said it to myself in the shower and in the car, the words a tidy attempt at a lid for something that had no seams. It helped other people sleep. It did not keep me from standing at the window at night and watching for a silhouette that would never manifest on the street. I thought about confronting Mark at times, about asking him if he knew what I'd felt in the nights, about holding him accountable for things I could not prove. But the facts were a hard boundary. The police had closed the case. The autopsy had a single, clinical answer. I could let suspicion be a private thing. It hovered like the scent of laundry detergent, there, but not proof. There were smaller things that told me this presence had a taste for routine. The knocks at 217 rarely varied. I would set alarms for myself at odd hours to catch it in the act, to stand wide awake with my hand on the doorknob like a person who might face down whatever came. But the pattern was always one step ahead, the timing precise enough to feel calibrated. The mind notices patterns, whether they are real or imagined. Perhaps I was giving the universe the shape it wanted so it would fit into my need for a story. In quiet moments, when the house had been quiet for nights, I would hear the echo of that childhood swing and wonder if the same force that once protected me had turned into something else, protective in one life and predatory in another. There are places where your history and your present cross paths, and you cannot tell which is the true north. People like tidy endings. They want to be told that a presence was kind or malicious or at least explainable. I learned to distrust tidy things. For a while I hoped the presence was Aisha, watching over us, keeping us safe. For a while I feared that it was something lying in wait that had learned the cadence of her voice to make children answer. I could not know which was truer. The grief stretched across both possibilities like a shadow.
When you live through weeks and months of such unsettledness, the small accidents of life begin to look like messages.
I would find a single spoon placed on the bedroom floor as if set there for me to step on. I would hear low humming in the daytime when the house was empty, the tune the same as one Aisha used to whistle while she cooked. I would wake with the knowledge of things, meal plans, appointments, written in my head the way someone might remember a phrase in a language they have only ever heard spoken. There were times when this helped, small comforts in the chaos. There were times when it frightened me. It felt like a negotiation with the impossible. We moved again, because rubble of memory accumulates like silt, and you cannot live too long with it in one place. The new house was a smaller place, with floors that creaked differently and light that came in at new angles. For a while the knocks did not transfer. Perhaps they had been tied to that particular street, to a house that kept its own secrets. Then, one night, months later, I woke and my phone read 2:17 a.m. From habit, more than belief, I listened. 3 taps came from the other side of the room, where Ela slept now in a bed with rails. For a half-breath, I allowed myself to imagine different endings. Then I remembered the other nights, 2 shadows, cabinets opening, the pull in the swing, and I realized the knock had followed us the way a memory follows its owner. Ela sleeps better than I do. She still talks sometimes in her sleep, murmurs that sometimes sound like sentences. When she climbs into my bed in the middle of the night, she presses her small body against me and whispers, "Did she come?" as if asking me to confirm a rumor. I tell her what I always tell her when she asks the things that no one should have to ask a child. She's safe, I say. I believe that because belief is a tool you can use to fix a place for something when you cannot prove it. I say it with the conviction of a man building a raft out of words. There are nights I cannot sleep at all. I count the rhythm of the house, the fridge's low thrum, the clock, the distant rumble of a truck on the highway, and I map them to 2:17. Sometimes I walk the perimeter of the house, flashlight in hand, like a poor soldier. Once, in the dark, I spotted something by the fence, a footprint in the grass where the dew had flattened it a certain way. The shoe tread was ordinary. It told me someone had been there, and it told me nothing else. People tell stories to make sense of what they fear. Maybe that is why our little family gathered those nights into a story with a time on the clock, a rhythm we could count. In the quiet, I made a sort of ritual out of it. Note the time, listen for 3 taps, attend to the sounds, hold the child close. It gave me agency even when everything else was agencyless. There were therapy sessions, long talks with friends who tried to thread logic through me. There were prayers, too, of a simple kind, nothing doctrinal, just requests to be left alone, or to be given an unmistakable sign. There are nights I cannot sleep at all. I count the rhythm of the house, the fridge's low thrum, the clock, the distant rumble of a truck on the highway, and I map them to 2:17. Sometimes I walk the perimeter of the house, flashlight in hand, like a poor soldier. Once, in the dark, I spotted something by the fence, a footprint in the grass where the dew had flattened it a certain way. The shoe tread was ordinary. It told me someone had been there, and it told me nothing else. People tell stories to make sense of what they fear. Maybe that is why our little family gathered those nights into a story with a time on the clock, a rhythm we could count. In the quiet, I made a sort of ritual out of it. Note the time, listen for 3 taps, attend to the sounds, hold the child close. It gave me agency even when everything else was agencyless. There were therapy sessions, long talks with friends who tried to thread logic through me. There were prayers, too, of a simple kind, nothing doctrinal, just requests to be left alone or to be given an unmistakable sign. I asked for a resolution that would allow me to sleep without fearing the floor. But life is rarely obliging in those ways. We learn to live with the unanswerable. We sell houses and buy others. We stack small comforts into a life. I painted Isla's room the color she asked for and set up a low lamp that made a moon of light in the corner. I taught her how to lock doors and how to tell an adult when she felt afraid. I taught myself to breathe. I still hear the knocks sometimes, and most nights I do not. Time does something funny to grief. It thins the raw edges, but leaves the scar. The clock on the stove that Aisha once liked, an old, stubborn thing, stopped during one of those nights and froze its hands at 2:17. I kept it because there is a certain honesty in a stopped clock. There is no pretending it is not broken, no saying, soon it will tick again. It sits in the hallway now, like a monument that asks less of me than the living did. When I pass it, I run my fingers over the dust, and sometimes imagine the knock in the small space between my shoulder blades. What do I want you to believe? I do not expect you to believe anything solid just because I say it. You may think I am a man broken by loss, and therefore prone to seeing ghosts. You may believe, with a fierce practical righteousness, that there is a simple explanation. That is fair. All I can give you are the facts of how it felt and how it moved. The exactness of the knock at 2:17. The way Isla spoke of visits. The nights I saw that second shadow at our doorstep. The rest is a map of my confusion. Sometimes at night, when the house breathes the small quiet and the clock ticks toward 2:17, I think of the swing. I think of a child saved by an invisible yank, and of a man who later will watch two shadows on his living room floor. These are not tidy parallels, but they are honest ones. They shape the way I see the world now. Sometimes protection and danger wear the same face. Sometimes something that saved you as a child grows up and asks different things. I do not know that Aisha was here. I do not know that anything malicious sat behind the door that knocked. What I know is this: a small pattern became a law in our nights, and laws can make faithful worshippers out of anyone. 2:17 is a time that has taught me to breathe when the world wants to hold me under. It has taught me to run when my child's safety is at stake. It has taught me that some questions will follow you across houses, across years, across the soft geography of your life, until you learn to carry them without collapsing. If you have a theory, if you think it was her or something else, or if you have a story like this of your own, tell me in the comments. I read them when the house is quiet. Share this with someone who likes unraveling threads. And if you want to know more about the nights, subscribe and ring the bell. I will come back with more pieces because there are more small things I have to tell you that did not fit in one telling. We are living in a rented house now, in a neighborhood where people trim their cars and water their grass with a kind of suburban devotion. By day, it is ordinary. By night, sometimes, it keeps its secrets. The clock on the stove still reads 2:17 in my memory, even if its hands at this new house are moving. Once, in a dream that felt like memory, I saw a hand, not mine, not hers, press gently on the swing's broken plank until the wood fit together like hands fitting into each other. When I woke, I touched the scar on my palm from the old rope and knew that some things follow you because they have been given permission to. Sometimes I tell myself I did the right thing, left the house, kept my daughter close, learned to lock doors. Sometimes I tell myself the wrong thing, that I should have opened the door and spoken through whatever voice there was. Mostly I tell myself this: that a life can be held together by small decisions, by the way you bend in an instant to gather a child up and keep her breathing. At 2:17 a.m., when the knock comes, I still listen. I still check the locks. I still hold my breath and count 3 taps that have become an impossible metronome for the shape of our nights. I do not sleep as well as I once did. I do not pretend to understand why a knock that sounds the same in different places could mean comfort or malice. All I can do is keep watch and teach my child how to be brave and be kind at once. The rest of it, who was on the other side, whether form or shadow or memory, stays uncertain. That, perhaps, is the worst and the truest part. Some questions are not there to be answered, only to be carried. Tonight, the house is quiet, and the clock is near 2:17. I can feel my heart start to arrange itself in anticipation. I will listen. I will go to Ila's room and place my hand on her small back.
I will check the door. If the knock comes, I will do what I have always done. Gather, protect, move. I will not open the door because some instincts, even gentler ones, must be reined in by the only law that matters now. Keep the child safe. That is the truth of it. The rest is speculation and the human hunger to make a story make sense. If you have a story like that, share it. If you want to read more of these nights, subscribe. If you have a theory about what knocks at 217, tell me below. I will be listening.